How much more confidence do you have heading over to the Republic after that victory last night?
Well, it was a great response, wasn't it, to an average performance in Wellington. All those players stood up. You know, I talk about attitude and accuracy, and when you put those two together, you get a performance like that. So I think it was outstanding, exactly what we needed. You know, people say, oh, Argentina didn't turn up, but actually All Blacks didn't give them a chance to turn up. They were in their face from minute one, Mills, really dominant in the contact area, which gets you front football, a better kicking game, and a real good attitude.
Yeah, attitude was right there. I mean, the result, fantastic, obviously, but also the fact that they won convincingly, I thought was... But they just looked like there was a lot of clarity, right? I mean, real simplistic in terms of their approach right from the get-go. They wanted to win the contact area. They were clinical the first 20 or so minutes and collecting points, and also the kick game and connecting in defensive line and putting the pressure on Argentina, Goldie. I think that was really effective.
Simply, the All Blacks passed the test and Argentina didn't. And history told us that this was a possibility given the results that we've seen between these two sides. And Argentina, particularly in the conditions and their ability to adapt against an All Black team who came in and delivered on all fronts, and they prepared well. They adapted to the conditions that were in front of them, and then it was a demolition. It was a clinic. And they couldn't be more impressed as a team, but they passed that test. Well, there's a different test coming up.
If you're sitting there scratching your head and wondering what was the difference between Test 1 in the Rugby Championship and Test 2, take a listen to your former Test captain, Sam Cane.
Obviously, All Black teams, you don't want to have a loss to get a reaction, but what were the things that this team focused on? I know you said there's always two things you take out of a loss to take into the next week. What were they?
Oh, one of them was there's a lot of, the game of rugby's probably never been more complicated and structured and stuff to remember. So we just tried to strip things back a little bit, and particularly towards the back end of the week, really just, it sounds simple, but trust ourselves as rugby players to go out and execute. And when your mind's free of information, really, you've done all the work at the start of the week, then it allows you the legs to run a bit quicker and the instincts to just be a little bit crisper. And I think we saw that, but as well, I thought our collision work, our breakdown, some of our cleans were so much better tonight as well. Those two areas probably.
So stripping things back to basics and clear minds, what does that tell you? Have there been too many voices in that All Blacks environment? Because many people have been questioning the 9 assistant coaches.
Well, the moment it started raining, early in the day, all of a sudden, all of that preparation you've done actually, in terms of game plan, goes out the door, right? I mean, as a coach, you go, it's simple now. We have to play in the right parts of the field. Our set piece has to be good. We put them under pressure. We force them to play, and then we dominate territory. So there was a lot of kicking where we found grass mills. And that was a significant difference where we were going to the air in Wellington and getting no reward. In those conditions, you put the ball in front of your team. You put little chip kicks in. All of those things allowed us to dominate the game line. We carried better, but ultimately they tried to play and paid the price for it.
The weather did dictate the way you were going to, try and get out there and play. And the fact was they had a mindset. And it's interesting to hear Sam say, they had to trust. The players had to trust sort of what they had to sort of go and do. And right from the get-go, they went out there and they trusted. If they got any turnovers, bang, right down the other end of the field. But they still had to execute stuff like this, be really clinical, pick up points. And as the game sort of evolved, JK, then they started to show, hey, well, our skill set, we can actually go a little bit wider. But that was built on the back end of their start and how clear they were.
Look, it's about, there's a positive to succession, right? So we lose 2007, and Jock Hobbs and that group of leadership said, let's not throw all that information out. Then what happened was we had Graham Henry move on to Steve Hansen, and then, we had Fozzie take over. This is the first time this All Black team's had this information coming in. So what's happened, I believe, is rightly so, the new coaching staff are going, we're going to change some stuff, and there's been an information overload. What they've done is they've learnt that over the first few weeks, and they have to strip it back. What Russie's doing in South Africa, he's got a stable side, so he'll be incrementally putting stuff in, but it's just been this information overload, and it's no one's fault. It's just a new coaching staff, a new staff. I think only Gilly, the trainer's been retained. So there's a whole lot of different stuff going on. So you've got all this information. And when you're a player, like Sam Cane said, you've got to free your mind up and just play footy. And that is hard sometimes with the information. So I think it's been an incredible learning period for everybody.
But if you think about the skill set you need in those conditions, we executed those really well. We've seen those kicks in behind. We've seen the fact you put the ball down the the short side. You go one pass and then you find an opportunity to turn them around. So the number of times we reread the opportunity, but more importantly, the necessary skills, Mills, to go out and deliver those knockout blows. This is magnificent, right?
Yeah.
But that's a simple understand. There's room down the short side. That's playing heads-up rugby when you know that there's nothing complicated about that. All we're trying to do is get behind them, is to put them under pressure. And when we got some momentum, we looked really good.
It's built on that. We know we've got skill set. Okay, our skill set is fantastic. We've always sort of thrown the ball around from a youngster right through. I think the problem that we've kind of had, we've probably gone out there and trying to rely on the skill set first rather than building the game and being really nice and patient about the sort of game, force the mistakes, then sort of find that confidence. And that once that confidence sort of happens, then your skill set comes a bit more into play because we know we've got that as a team.
Does this kind of game plan work when you're under pressure? Because the All Blacks weren't under a whole lot of pressure last night.
The ability to cope with pressure is to do your game plan any time of the game. And that's what you need to learn. That's what you need to understand. So I think it's a really interesting point. You know, we cannot follow and we should never follow. South Africa are amazing because they play their style of rugby. We've got to play ours, and ours is skill-based. So the pattern of our game needs to be able to free up all those people that you've seen on, like Will Jordan, Rieko Ioane. We need to build a game plan around what our X factor is.
Could I ask a question then? Because we dominated the scrums and we dominated the collision. We're coming up against very much a different beast in South Africa, right? We dominated the scrum and collisions against Fiji, and you get the same similar type of scoreboard result. So I look at this and go, you know what? This game plan, this selection, we always talk about that, I think was specifically for this game. All of a sudden, Scott Barrett becomes available again. Clearly, the skipper's going to come back in. I think the role that Sam Cane played in this game was absolutely critical. I think his role might have changed the moment he knew he was actually in the squad, in the team, the 23, to play the game. I think his role might have changed.
What was your question, Goldie?
Well, my question is, are you saying we take that game plan to South Africa against the Springboks and expect to get the dominance up front and through the middle of the park, scrum time, that allows you to dominate territory? Because that's what we got.
With South Africa, you've got to win your own set piece and make sure that you put them under pressure. Can you dominate them? Let's hope it's even. So if we're going to play a game, then the answer is yes. Because for me, we've got to compete line out and scrum, but we've got to run them around the park and use our skills to actually be X factor. I think we've got to do that.
You've got to, I mean, I think you take elements of last night. You know, you've got to take elements of last night and go, hey, well, this. I mean, look at the guys that sort of been under pressure. The directors. Damien McKenzie probably had his best game in the director's seat because he was clear of what the task was. Anything that sort of turned over, bang it down. They're connected. Their line was. You've got to get that. And when you add little wee things in terms of the way you want to play South Africa, but everyone's got to trust that. You go there with a game plan. You've got to trust it. And, okay, if it doesn't work, that's when you kind of try and learn from it. But you've got to win really big moments. And they didn't get that against the Argentinian side, but they'll know, especially the leaders. You win big moments. You win the ball in the air. You don't go to line-outs. You win the physical dominance by possibly running them around, but being really sort of the accuracy in your attack. If you go to scrum time, win those big moments, get down the other ends, and then capitalise them with points.
A huge challenge for the All Blacks because the Springboks, I talked about it before the break, they know who they are. They know what they're going to bring. They know the team and the options they've got available to them. They rested significant number of their star players, and then the bench came on and dominated. But for Australia, I just don't... Mills, I'm not sure where they go. It's a really bad matchup for them. The strengths that the Springboks have dominate them in areas which take them out of the game. And they hung in for the first 40 minutes in tough conditions, but they scored one try in 2 tests.
Yeah, and I mean, I know you didn't want to see that footage of the Golden Oldie sort of scrums, but they're all Australian feeds. So they're actually getting front foot ball, they're getting quality ball and so the defensive effort from the South Africans is a lot tougher to defend like that because they're getting that pill. And it is, I'm with you, Goldie. I think Australia's in dire straits. I mean, the fact that they've sort of gone out there against a South African team who, one, they've got real belief in their game plan. They are brutal. They're brutally physical. But also, when you make 10 changes, perhaps not play as well as, and they didn't play as well as you thought they could have played, and still convincingly win, and possibly even if there was contested scrums, they probably would have beaten by more.
They bombed a couple of tries in the first half, a couple of gimmies, JK. The Springboks did, and this could and when they get a roll on, and that's the other side of it, is that when they get confidence and when they get belief, and they've always had belief, but they're getting real confidence in their game, and they've shown in 2 test matches. They've got a couple of game plans, different game plans. They've got one they know they can go to.
Yes.
They're starting to develop another one when the conditions are a little bit better. We have to be concerned on the evidence of what they've just done to Australia.
Oh, they are world champs.
Yep.
And they play to their strengths. They've got an amazing coach. He's innovative. He moves forward, right? Now, this is nothing against South Africa, people, because they are world champs and they're great at, like, big parts of the game. It's going to be the biggest test match we've played, I believe, in the last decade.
We said that last year in the World Cup final. We said that 2 years ago when we toured in South Africa.
I love what this last weekend showed us. The fact that you got 2 teams that can play in the wet as well. The South Africans are just as dominant when they are free-flowing and they don't necessarily need the scrum. They've got strike power and fire weapons out wide. Now, hey, we're going to go to South Africa. It shouldn't rain, and so we probably might get we might get that sort of style that you're sort of asking for. The big threat is South Africa. I just think, man, when you've got guys that can fill in positions and absolutely go out there and win the way they did, man.
But Mills, I reckon Rushy put that out through the media that it was the B-side. We know that they've just got 33 international players at the moment. And we used to have that, right, in our golden era when we won 2 in a row. We had a side that where anyone could have played. We're rebuilding, right? So I think for me, these guys are world champions. They go in incredibly strong favourites, and welcome to my South African friends. You are favourites in a couple of weeks. So all the pressure's on you.
Okay.
I'm not sure how it works for the All Blacks, but anyway.
So the pressure's on South Africa, apparently.
Totally.
Okay.
Of course it is. They're world champions. They beat us in the final.
Expectations are that the All Blacks go over there and win from New Zealand.
We can.
That's the expectation.
We can. Hey,
You expect them to as former All
Of
Blacks.
course we can win. But this is what I'm saying. Like, it will be, and we could ask you two, what is some of your greatest wins? At home at Eden Park or actually over there at Alice Park?
South Africa.
You remember those?
South African tours.
96.
Wow.
Yeah. And by the way, they will probably have to win both games to win the Rugby Championship. That's going to be hard.
It's going to be tough, but it's
We've
great.
got
It's going to be so good to watch, isn't it? We're all so looking forward to those 2 test matches starting in 2 weeks' time here on Sky Sport.